The training arena fell silent except for the wet sound of flesh hitting metal. Cadet Jackson Shen lay flat against the obsidian floor, blood trailing from his split lip, while the Vorkathian instructor's talons clicked closer. Around the circular chamber, 17 cadets from 7 different species watched with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. None moved to help. Pathetic. Instructor Velnock hissed, his triple-jointed legs bringing his massive frame to tower over the human. Your species begged for entry into the Galactic Defense Academy, pleaded for a chance to prove themselves worthy of the stars. And this is what Earth sends us? A soft thing that bleeds from a simple conditioning drill? Jackson pushed himself to his knees, tasting copper. The gravity in this sector had been increased to 2.3 standard. Nothing he couldn't handle after 6 months of hell. But the impact dampeners in his training suit had malfunctioned 3 minutes into the exercise. He'd reported it. Velnock had smiled with all 4 mouths and told him to continue. On your feet, Earthborn. It was a category, like vermin or waste. Humans had been integrated into galactic society for only 5 years, barely a heartbeat in the timeline of civilizations that had sailed between stars for millennia. Earth was the new kid, the primitive backwater that had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel through what the collective called blind luck and reckless stupidity. Jackson stood. His legs shook but held. Again, Velnock said. Defensive pattern Theta 9. If you can complete it without crying, perhaps I won't recommend your immediate expulsion. Someone laughed. A chittering sound from one of the Civaxian cadets. Others joined in, a chorus of alien amusement that echoed off the arena's curved walls. Jackson took his stance. The simulation would generate 10 threat vectors simultaneously, each requiring a specific counter-movement. Most species trained for this drill for years before Academy admission. He'd had 6 months an outdated data file smuggled to Earth by a sympathetic Centaurian merchant. The holograms materialized. Bladed limbs, energy weapons, projectiles moving at speeds that made them nearly invisible. Jackson moved. His body flowed through the patterns like water finding cracks in stone. Block. Deflect. Roll. Strike. The damaged suit sent jolts of pain through his nerves with every impact, but pain was just information. Pain told you what needed fixing. It didn't tell you to stop. He cleared 8 vectors in 15 seconds. The 9th caught him across the ribs, a simulated plasma lance that would have vaporized his torso in actual combat. The suit translated it to electric agony that dropped him to one knee. The 10th vector, a multi-bladed construct, descended toward his exposed neck. Jackson's hand shot up. He caught the holographic blade between his palms, holding it centimeters from his throat. The simulation wasn't designed to be stopped this way. You were supposed to evade or deflect. Catching required pressure, timing, and a complete disregard for the pain receptors screaming in both hands. The arena went absolutely still. Jackson held the blade for 3 seconds, 5, 10. Blood from his palms, real blood from real cuts the haptic feedback had opened, dripped onto the floor. Then he pushed the hologram away and stood, letting it dissipate. Velnock's expression was unreadable. You failed. I survived. You deviated from the approved pattern. The pattern assumed functional equipment. Jackson kept his voice level. I adapted. You improvised like a primitive savage. I improvised like someone who wants to live. But before he could respond, the chamber's entry portal shimmered. Every cadet immediately snapped to attention, fists to chests in the collective standard salute. The figure that entered was Shen Kal, the Vorkathian Queen's personal observer. She wore the silver and black armor of the Royal Strategic Division, and her presence here meant someone very important was watching this training session. Shen Kal's eyes, all 6 of them, scanned the cadets before settling on Jackson. The human. Yes, observer, Velnock said quickly. Cadet Chen was just demonstrating the limitations of his species. I watched the entire exercise. Shen Kal moved closer to Jackson, her movements precise and economical. Your suit malfunctioned. Yes, observer. We reported this to Instructor Velnock. Yes, observer. And you were ordered to continue despite the equipment failure. You failed the standard pattern. Yes, observer. Yet you survived a scenario designed to be completed with full equipment functionality. She stopped directly in front of him. Explain your logic in attempting to catch the final vector. Catching was untested, so it represented the only variable with potential for success. You chose probable injury over certain death. I chose to keep fighting. Then she turned to Velnock. The Queen wishes to observe this human in the command trials. Observer, the command trials are reserved for senior cadets who have demonstrated exceptional tactical... The Queen has made her interest known. Shenkal's voice could have frozen hydrogen. Will you tell her that her judgment is flawed? Velnok's talons retracted. No, Observer. Cadet Chen, report to medical facilities for treatment, then to briefing chamber 7. Yes, Observer. One more thing, human. The command trials have a mortality rate of 12% even with fully functional equipment. She looked back at him. Do you understand what this means? Jackson met her gaze. It means 88% survive, Observer. The faintest flicker of something crossed her face, too quick to identify. Then she was gone, and Jackson was left standing in an arena full of aliens who were no longer laughing. The medical bay's lights were too bright and too blue, designed for Vorkathian biology. Jackson sat on an examination platform while a Centaurian medic, one of the few species with anatomy similar enough to humans to understand their physiology, worked on his hands. This is foolish, the medic said, her translator rendering her whistling speech into flat collective standard. You barely survived basic training, and now you're being thrown into trials designed for cadets with years of experience. The Queen is testing you. I know. Jackson watched the nanosutures knit his flesh back together. The technology still amazed him. On Earth, these injuries would have taken weeks to heal. Do you know what the trials actually involve? Leadership under pressure. The medic made a sound that might have been laughter. Leadership under pressure. Yes, that's what the official documentation says. She finished the last suture and met his eyes. The truth is, the trials were designed by the Vorkathian military hierarchy to break candidates who show too much independent thinking. The Queen's strategists believe that true leaders emerge from scenarios where all standard doctrines fail, so they're impossible. Just designed to force you into choices where every option has catastrophic consequences. Most candidates freeze. Some make decisions that reveal character flaws, cowardice, cruelty, megalomaniacal tendencies. The 12% who die are usually the ones who refuse to make any choice at all. Jackson flexed his newly healed hands. What happens to the ones who pass? Or liabilities. The medic began putting away her tools. The Queen doesn't observe the trials personally, except in rare circumstances. She has thousands of military academies across hundreds of worlds. For her to take direct interest in a single cadet, she trailed off. What? It means she sees something. Potential or threat? The medic's expression was grave. For your species' sake, human, I hope you're the former. Briefing Chamber 7 was empty except for a holographic display showing a star system Jackson didn't recognize. He studied it while he waited, noting the tactical positions, the resource distribution, the natural choke points. You're early. Jackson turned. Shenkal had entered silently along with 2 other Vorkathian officials he didn't recognize. They wore the dark purple of the Tactical Assessment Division. I prefer to be prepared, Observer. Preparation is admirable, but no amount of preparation will ready you for what's coming. She activated the holographic display, and the star system expanded to fill the room. This is the Kethrin system. 2 years ago, it was the site of the worst military disaster in recent collective history. A fleet of 47 ships under the command of Admiral Gorenthkau was completely destroyed by a Ravager incursion. Jackson had heard of the Ravagers, the collective's only true enemy, a species of hive-mind predators that consumed entire civilizations. Earth had been briefed on them during the integration process, shown the footage of what happened to worlds that fell to their swarms. Your trial will place you in command of a simulation based on that battle, Shenkal continued. You will have the same intelligence Admiral Gorenthkal had, the same resources, the same time constraints, and the same outcome? One of the tactical assessment officers spoke, his voice harsh. Admiral Gorenthkal was a decorated veteran of 63 campaigns. He made the best decisions possible with the information available. The battle was simply unwinnable. Every simulation since has confirmed this. Every cadet who has attempted this scenario has failed. Then why use it as a trial? To see how you fail, Shenkal said. Will you sacrifice your fleet in a hopeless fight? Will you retreat and abandon the colony world below? Will you attempt desperate tactics that might save a few at the cost of many? These choices reveal character. Jackson looked at the holographic display, at the positions where 47 ships had died. When do I start? You have 2 hours to review the historical data and tactical reports. Then you'll enter the simulation chamber. The trial will last as long as you survive, or until you admit defeat. Shen Kal stepped closer. One question before we begin, Cadet Shen. Why did your species fight so hard for Academy admission? Earth has no strategic value, limited resources, and a population that barely understands basic collective protocols. You could have lived peacefully as a client state, protected but irrelevant. Why reach for the stars when you knew you would be mocked, challenged, and likely broken? Because we'd rather die trying to stand than live comfortably on our knees. Shen Kal studied him for a long moment, then something like respect flickered across her features. Review your materials, Cadet. The Queen will be watching. The simulation chamber was a perfect sphere, 30 meters in diameter, its walls covered in haptic gel that could simulate any environment. Jackson stood at its center, connected to the neural interface that would feed the scenario directly into his consciousness. Around the chamber, in an observation gallery he couldn't see, officers and instructors would be watching. Somewhere among them, if Shen Kal had been truthful, was the Queen herself. The world dissolved. He was suddenly on the bridge of a collective battleship, the flagship of Admiral Gorentkal's fleet. Holographic displays surrounded him, showing 46 other ships in formation around the colony world of Catherine Prime. On the surface, 8 million civilians went about their lives unaware of what was coming. Then the sensors screamed. Ravager ships, hundreds of them, tore into reality at the system's edge. They moved like a disease spreading across healthy tissue, their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence. The swarm didn't attack immediately. They never did. First they surrounded, trapped. Then they consumed. All ships, defensive formation Omega, Jackson heard himself say. The words came automatically, pulled from the historical records he'd memorized. He was following the script, making the same calls Admiral Gorenthal had made. The fleet moved into position, energy shields powered up, weapons armed. The Ravagers struck. The battle was chaos. Ships died in the first wave. Colony escorts too slow to evade the enemy's plasma bursts. The fleet's return fire was devastating, each shot vaporizing Ravager vessels, but for every one destroyed, 3 more took its place. 15 minutes into the engagement, Jackson understood why the scenario was considered unwinnable. The Ravagers weren't just overwhelming in numbers. They were adapting. Every tactic the fleet employed, the swarm countered within minutes. Energy weapons became ineffective as the Ravagers evolved shielding. Kinetic weapons were dodged with impossible precision. Even the nuclear option, something Admiral Gorenthal had deployed in desperation, only thinned the swarm temporarily. 23 ships remained. Jackson stared at the tactical display, at the colony world below, at the civilians who would die when the Ravagers broke through. Admiral Gorenthal had fought until only his flagship remained, buying time for a fraction of the population to evacuate. It was the best anyone could have done. But Jackson wasn't Admiral Gorenthal. He pulled up the sensor data again, focusing not on the Ravager ships but on the space between them. The swarm moved in patterns, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Coordinated, connected, hive mind. His fingers flew across the holographic controls, accessing data the Admiral might not have prioritized. There, a slight variance in the quantum signatures of the Ravager ships closest to the system's third planet, a gas giant with intense electromagnetic fields. The hive mind had a range limit. Ships too far from the core swarm were slightly less coordinated, their movements delayed by microseconds. It wasn't much. But it was something. All ships, Jackson said, his voice cutting through the chaos of the bridge. New orders. Cease defensive posture. Full attack pattern Delta 7 target coordinates. He designated the gas giant. The simulated officers hesitated. Delta 7 was a deep space assault formation, designed for attacking stationary targets. Using it here meant abandoning the colony world's immediate defense. Execute! Jackson's voice carried a command authority that surprised even him. The fleet broke formation and surged toward the gas giant. The Ravagers pursued exactly as he'd anticipated. The swarm wouldn't let their prey escape. It went against their fundamental nature. As the fleet approached the gas giant, Jackson began the second phase. All ships deploy EM pulse generators at designated coordinates. Detonation sequence Gamma. The officers scrambled to comply. EM pulse generators were typically used to disable electronic systems, useless against biological ships like the Ravagers, but Jackson wasn't targeting the ships. The generators formed a network around the gas giant, and when Jackson triggered the detonation, they didn't just pulse, They created a sustained electromagnetic field that interacted with the planet's natural magnetosphere. The result was a zone of intense, chaotic interference that spanned millions of kilometers. The Ravagers entered the zone, and suddenly, they weren't a swarm anymore. They were individual ships cut off from the hive mind by the electromagnetic chaos. Their movements became erratic, uncoordinated. They collided with each other, fired on their own kind, scattered in confusion. All ships, fire at will. Maintain proximity to the interference zone. The battle turned. Without their hive mind coordination, the Ravagers were dangerous but beatable. The fleet picked them apart, ship by ship, using the electromagnetic zone as both shield and weapon. 40 minutes later, the last Ravager vessel was destroyed. The simulation froze. Jackson stood on the bridge of the flagship, surrounded by tactical displays showing a fleet of 17 surviving ships, more than twice what Admiral Gorinth Kahl had managed to preserve. The colony world was intact. The civilians were safe. He'd won. The simulation chamber dissolved, returning him to the sphere of haptic gel. The neural interface disconnected, and Jackson staggered, suddenly aware of his physical body again. His legs shook. Sweat soaked his training uniform. The chamber's door opened. Shenkal entered, her expression unreadable. "That was," she began, then stopped. "Wrong?" Jackson offered. "Impossible? A fluke? Unprecedented." She circled him slowly, like she had in the training arena. "The Queen wishes to speak with you." "Now?" "Immediately." The walk through the Academy's corridors was surreal. Cadets who had mocked him hours earlier now pressed themselves against walls as he passed, their expressions ranging from awe to fear. Word had already spread. The Earthborn had done the impossible. They reached a section of the Academy Jackson had never seen, the Royal Wing, where visiting dignitaries and high-ranking officials resided when observing Academy operations. The guards at the entrance were members of the Queen's personal battalion, elite warriors who had earned their positions through centuries of service. They didn't stop Shenkal and Jackson from entering. The chamber beyond was austere by royal standards. No lavish decorations, no displays of wealth. Just a simple room with a holographic star map covering one wall and a single figure standing before it. Queen Vashtara was smaller than Jackson had expected, barely taller than his own 1.80 frame. But she radiated authority like a sun radiated heat. Her armor was deep crimson, the color of Vorkathian royalty, and her 6 eyes held an intelligence that made Jackson feel like he was being dissected and catalogued with a single glance. "Cadet Chen," she said. Her voice was surprisingly soft, rendered by the translator with a slight musical quality. "You've created a problem for me." Jackson had rehearsed a dozen greetings, formal responses, appropriate protocols. None of them seemed adequate now. "Your Majesty, She raised one taloned hand, silencing him. "Do you know why I observed your trial personally?" "No, Your Majesty. Because Instructor Velnok filed a report recommending your immediate expulsion. He cited your inability to follow standard protocols, your tendency toward reckless improvisation, and your primitive human instincts as evidence that your species is unfit for collective military service." The Queen turned to face him fully, and he was correct. Jackson's heart sank. "You don't follow protocols," the Queen continued. "You improvise constantly. Your instincts are indeed primitive, shaped by a species that evolved fighting predators with crude tools instead of developing civilizations among the stars." She stepped closer. "And that is precisely why I wanted to see you perform. Your Majesty, the collective has existed for 7,000 years, Cadet Chen. In that time, we have refined warfare into an art form. We have doctrines for every scenario, protocols for every contingency, strategies tested across 1 million battlefields. Our military academies produce excellent soldiers who execute plans flawlessly." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "But they rarely produce leaders who can see beyond those plans. Admiral Gorinth Kahl was a brilliant tactician who followed every protocol perfectly, and he lost because the enemy didn't care about our protocols." She gestured to the holographic star map. "The Ravagers are winning, Cadet. Not because they're stronger or more advanced, but because they adapt faster than we can revise our doctrines. By the time our military councils analyze a battle and update our tactical databases, the Ravagers have evolved 3 new strategies." The Queen's voice carried a weight of terrible knowledge. "We are losing this war slowly, watching our civilization get devoured piece by piece, because we are trapped by 7,000 years of success." "But the briefing said the collective was holding the line." "The briefings lie." The Queen's words were blunt. We tell client species that the war is manageable because we fear panic more than we value truth. That the reality is that we lose ground every year. In a century, perhaps two, the Ravagers will reach the core worlds. And unless something changes, the collective will fall. She moved to the star map, highlighting systems along the frontier. This is why I take interest in primitive species, Cadet. Not because I believe you are superior, you are not. Your technology is millennia behind ours. Your understanding of the universe is laughably limited, and your lifespans are so brief you barely have time to learn anything before you die. She looked back at him. But you think differently. Your species evolved in chaos, adapted to constant change, learned to survive in environments that would have destroyed more advanced civilizations. You are what we used to be, before we became complacent in our excellence. Jackson's mind raced. You're saying you need humans to fight the Ravagers? I'm saying I need humans to teach us how to fight like you do, without reverence for doctrine, without fear of breaking protocols, without the paralysis that comes from too much knowledge. The Queen's expression hardened. But there is a problem. Most of my strategic council believes that primitive species are more dangerous than useful. They see your improvisation as chaos, your adaptability as instability. They believe that giving humans, or any young species, significant military authority would destabilize the collective more than the Ravagers ever could. And what do you believe, Your Majesty? I believe civilizations that cannot change deserve to die. The Queen's words were cold, absolute. I also believe that I cannot simply decree that humans be integrated into command positions. The Council would resist, fragment the collective at a time when unity is essential. I need proof that your species can be trusted with power. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show Jackson's trial results, tactical breakdowns, decision trees, probability analyses. You performed adequately in the simulation. Better than any cadet has before, certainly, but one success does not prove reliability. What would prove it, Your Majesty? The Queen smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. The Academy's final examination takes place in 3 months. It is a live exercise, real ships, real weapons, though with safeguards to prevent actual fatalities. Cadets are divided into teams and compete in a strategic war game across an entire star system. The winning team's members are guaranteed command track positions. The losing teams are not. You want me to win. I want you to lead a team to victory against opponents who have trained for years, who understand collective doctrine perfectly, who will use every advantage to ensure that the primitive human fails spectacularly. The Queen's eyes bored into him. If you can win despite this, despite being mocked and sabotaged and given every reason to fail, then I will have the evidence I need to argue for human integration at the highest levels of collective government. Not just his own future, but Earth's place among the stars. And if I lose? Then your species will remain a curiosity, protected but powerless, for generations, perhaps forever. The Queen turned back to her star map. You have 3 months to prepare, Cadet. I suggest you use them wisely. Dismissed. Jackson saluted and turned to leave. He was at the door when the Queen spoke again. One more thing, human. The team selection for the final examination is random. You may end up leading cadets who despise you, who will undermine your authority, who would rather fail than follow Earth's orders. Her voice carried a warning. The trial you passed today was merely academic. The real test will be whether you can lead those who do not wish to be led. The door closed behind him, and Jackson stood in the corridor, the full magnitude of his situation crashing over him like a wave. One thing, the future of his entire species hanging on his ability to command aliens who considered him inferior. He thought about his instructors at the Defense Academy back on Earth, the ones who had told him he was humanity's best hope. He'd thought they were being dramatic, giving him motivation for the mission ahead. Now he realized they'd been telling the literal truth. Shenkal was waiting outside. The Queen has arranged for you to have access to the Academy's full tactical database. You'll also be assigned a personal training schedule. Thank you, Observer. Don't thank me yet. Shenkal began walking, and Jackson fell into step beside her. The news of your trial results has already spread throughout the Academy. Some cadets are impressed. Many are angry. A few are terrified. You've disrupted the natural order, human, and the collective does not adapt to disruption gracefully. I noticed. They walked in silence for a moment before Shenkal spoke again, her voice lower. I was part of Admiral Gorenthikal's fleet. I survived the Catherine disaster because I was on a ship assigned to the evacuation detail. I watched good soldiers die because we couldn't think beyond our training. She stopped and faced him. What you did in that simulation, using the environment as a weapon, breaking the Hive Mind's coordination, it was something none of us considered. We were too focused on fighting the enemy directly to think about fighting the connection between them. Sometimes the best victories come from changing the rules of the engagement. A very human philosophy. Shenkal resumed walking. The collective prefers to perfect the rules rather than change them. It's kept us alive for millennia. But perhaps, she trailed off, perhaps survival is not the same as living. She stopped at a junction in the corridor. Your quarters are that way. I suggest you rest. Tomorrow, your real training begins. Jackson watched her leave, then made his way to his quarters. The room was small, functional, designed for a Verkothian cadet and barely adequate for a human. He collapsed onto the sleeping platform and stared at the ceiling, his mind refusing to quiet. 3 months. He pulled up his personal data pad and opened a message interface. Earth was 63 light-years away, and even with quantum communication, there would be a delay. But he needed to tell someone what had happened. Began typing. Mom, Dad, I know it's been a while since my last message. Things have been intense. I can't share most of the details, classified protocols, but I wanted you to know that I'm okay. More than okay, actually. Something happened today that I'm still processing. The short version is that I got noticed by people who matter, and they're giving me a chance to prove that humans belong out here among the stars. The pressure is immense. The odds are not great. But when have we ever let that stop us? He paused, thinking about how to phrase the next part. I miss Earth. I miss gravity that doesn't require constant adjustment. I miss food that actually tastes like food instead of nutrient paste. I miss talking to people who understand references to human history and culture. But I don't regret being here. Every day I see wonders that most humans won't experience for decades. Every day I learn things that will help our species find its place in this incredible, terrifying universe. And every day I'm reminded why we fought so hard to leave the cradle and reach for something greater. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest or the most advanced, but we refuse to quit. That has to count for something. He signed the message and sent it off, knowing it would be hours before they received it, days before any response could reach him. Then he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new chances to either prove himself or fail spectacularly. The human cadet, mocked and dismissed by those who had sailed the stars for millennia, had 3 months to accomplish the impossible. He couldn't wait to get started.